A young girl, Kay Polton, went out to ride her bicycle in her yard one evening. When her mother, Judy, went to check on her a few minutes later, Kay was gone. Despite a frantic search by neighbors and the police, Kay was nowhere to be found. The case remained unsolved for 2 years with no leads or answers. Kay was born on September 20th, 1989, in Rochester, New York. She was the only child, and her parents divorced when she was 3. Kay stayed with her mother while maintaining a good relationship with her father. Due to financial struggles, Judy worked a part-time job delivering magazines, hoping to save enough money for a trip to Disney World. On the evening of May 23, 1994, while Judy was preparing to deliver magazines, Kay asked to go outside to ride her tricycle. Judy allowed it, telling Kay to stay within the yard. However, when Judy went to check on her, Kay was gone. The police were called and the search began immediately. Officers combed the complex, which had around 300 units, but there were no signs of Kay or her bicycle. The search continued into the night, and around 4 a.m., the case was reclassified as a kidnapping. Detectives investigated Judy's personal life to rule out any possible suspects. Judy pointed to a man named Mark, a 22-year-old resident of the complex, whose behavior seemed odd. He had made unsettling comments about Kay and other children in the complex, which raised concerns for Judy. Mark was questioned and even passed a polygraph test, but no evidence linking him to Kay's disappearance was found. The investigation stalled, and the case went cold for several months. Judy, desperate for answers, continued her search tirelessly, raising money and contacting media outlets to keep the case alive. Despite all her efforts, there were no significant leads. 2 years later, in August 1996, Mark's wife contacted the police, revealing that Mark had confessed to killing Kay during an argument. However, due to legal restrictions regarding information shared between spouses, the police couldn't use the confession in court. Despite doubts about the timing of the confession, detectives were now convinced that Mark had been involved. The investigation into his role in Kay's disappearance was revived. Mark and his family had moved out of Kay's apartment complex shortly after her disappearance, amidst serious allegations. He had been reported by the parents of 2 girls for being seen standing naked in his doorway, though no investigation was carried out as he was on his own property. However, this raised suspicions for Detective Crow. Mark had relocated to a city 50 miles away, and when Crow went there, he was greeted by Mark's mother, who informed him that Mark wouldn't speak without a lawyer. Crow realized there wasn't much he could do since a confession made to a spouse wouldn't hold up in court, and a lawyer would block any attempts to question him. Despite this, Crow persisted, and after some conversation with Mark's mother, Mark himself came out. He agreed to speak with Crow on the condition that they would go to a lawyer afterward. They met at a restaurant where Crow kept the conversation casual, which eventually led Mark to open up. He expressed regret for his actions toward Kay and admitted that her image had haunted him for years. Crow cleverly fed Mark's ego by suggesting that he had successfully deceived the investigators, prompting Mark to share how he had disposed of Kay's tricycle after her disappearance. Mark explained how he disassembled the bike and hid the pieces to avoid detection, taking them out in bags even though police were monitoring the complex. Crow leaned forward, his piercing gaze fixed on Mark. He knew this was the moment when everything could come to light. "Mark," he began, his voice calm but firm, "if you just confess, it could work in your favor. Maybe it'll lighten your sentence. It's the best way out." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting to the floor before meeting Crow's. He was clearly conflicted. "Look, I don't want to make things worse for myself," Mark mumbled, his voice tinged with a mix of fear and guilt. "I'll tell you everything, but I need to talk to my lawyer first." Crow sighed, leaning back, clearly not buying it. "You know," he said slowly, "if you don't confess, Kay's parents will never know what really happened to their daughter. They'll be left in the dark, forever. Don't you think they deserve to know the truth?" Mark's face tightened, his fingers trembling as he wrung them together. Finally, he spoke, almost in a whisper. "Okay, I'll tell you. I killed her. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." Crow's expression remained unchanged, but inside he was skeptical. The way Mark said it seemed rehearsed, like he was trying to convince himself as much as Crow. "How did it happen?" Crow asked, his voice taking on a colder edge. Mark took a deep breath, his eyes unfocused as he recalled the events. "I strangled her," he confessed, his voice low, almost as if he was ashamed of his own words. "It wasn't planned, but she didn't listen to me. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It just happened." Crow studied him for a moment, his instincts telling him there was more to the story. "What do you mean it just happened? You had to have some motive. Why did she come to your apartment in the first place?" Mark's gaze flickered nervously, and Crow could see the tension rising in him. "She came over. I didn't force her. She agreed to come, but things got out of hand. I panicked." Mark's voice trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the details. "And then?" Crow prodded, not letting him off the hook. Mark shifted in his seat again. "After it happened, I didn't know what to do, so I took her body. I hid it in a tank at my workplace, a big tank of liquid coolant. It was the perfect place to keep her hidden. No one would think to look there." Crow's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just an accidental death. There was something far more chilling in Mark's story. "And you continued on like nothing happened?" he asked, his voice almost incredulous. Mark nodded, a cold smile creeping across his face. "Yeah, I even joined the search for her. Acted all concerned. Everyone thought I was just another guy looking for a missing friend." The story made Crow's skin crawl. Mark had clearly thought through every detail, covering his tracks. "So when the body was found, what did you expect?" Crow asked, his voice taking on a dark tone. "Did you really think it would go unnoticed? That they wouldn't figure out something was off?" Mark's face fell. "By the time they found her, she was so decomposed that they couldn't tell what really happened. It wasn't clear, but they confirmed it was her. It was too late. I'd already convinced everyone that I was innocent." His voice cracked, a brief flicker of regret crossing his features before he quickly masked it. Crow knew that Mark had maintained his innocence long after the body was discovered, only for the truth to finally surface. Mark was arrested, charged with the murder of Cale, and sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, his lawyer had been able to negotiate a deal, dropping the kidnapping charges, a move that would allow Mark to escape a longer sentence. But even that couldn't erase the darkness in his past. In 2010, the long-forgotten case of Viola Manville's 1988 murder was reopened. DNA evidence linked Mark, previously a suspect, to her death. And in 2011, he confessed without remorse, stating, "She was in the wrong place at the wrong time." His cold, emotionless confession led to an additional 28-year sentence. The case also highlighted the tragic, wrongful conviction of Frank Sterling, who had spent 19 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Released and compensated, Frank's life was forever scarred, and he passed away a few years later, never fully recovering. Had Mark been caught earlier, Cale's death might have been prevented, and Frank's life could have been spared the injustice that haunted him. Now behind bars, Mark's past actions left a trail of devastation, his darkness finally catching up with him.